He's fine. You don't understand.
Get back down.
We are not going back to your village.
Yet. It comes from the Beatles.
Like you and I have a lot in common, kiddo.
About the Ark. It came down like... Understand. You're on the ground.
For worse, here, we never went through that. Truth be told, our scientists were blown away.
You won't like it. The pie's way better.
So we have friends out there.
The title The 100 sounds like it refers to a group of teenage prisoners sent to a poisoned Earth. But by the time this 7-season journey ends, that number has become something much bigger. It represents an experiment repeated across planets, generations, and civilizations. Take frightened people, place them under impossible pressure, and ask whether survival will reveal their humanity or destroy it. At first, the choices seem simple. Find food, build shelter, stay alive until help arrives. Then the questions become harder. Can killing one person save hundreds? Does peace still matter when your enemy wants revenge? And after humanity ruins one home after another, does it still deserve another chance? That escalation is what makes the 100 more than a young adult survival drama. The series begins with reckless teenagers exploring a forest and ends with the remaining human race facing judgment for everything it has done. Between those points, Clarke Griffin, Bellamy Blake, Octavia Blake, Reyes, John Murphy, and their allies repeatedly save humanity while sacrificing pieces of themselves. The story begins 97 years after nuclear war devastated Earth. The survivors live in orbit aboard the A.L.I.E, a massive station assembled from several smaller space stations. What began as an emergency refuge has become the last known human civilization. Life on the A.L.I.E looks controlled, but that control is built on fear. Oxygen, food, medicine, and living space are limited. Almost every crime committed by an adult is punishable by death. Prisoners are executed by being floated into space, while offenders under 18 are locked away until they are old enough to face review. The A.L.I.E.'s leaders insist that these brutal laws are necessary. Chancellor Thelonious Jaha carries the responsibility of preserving the population. Marcus Kane, a senior council member, often supports severe action because he believes sentiment could kill everyone. Abby Griffin, the station's chief medical officer, understands the danger but refuses to accept that compassion must disappear for humanity to survive. Their crisis becomes urgent when engineers discover that the A.L.I.E.'s life support systems are failing. The station has far less time than the public knows. Repairing it may be impossible, and telling everyone could cause panic. The council needs to know whether Earth has become habitable, but sending experienced adults would expose the truth and consume resources, so they choose people the A.L.I.E. already considers expendable. 100 juvenile prisoners. Among them is Abby's daughter, Clarke Griffin. Clarke wasn't imprisoned because she was violent or selfish. Her father, Jake Griffin, discovered the A.L.I.E.'s failing oxygen system and wanted to warn the population. When the leadership stopped him, Clarke knew too much. Jake was executed, while Clarke was placed in solitary confinement. She enters the story carrying two powerful beliefs. First, leaders should tell people the truth. Second, survival without morality isn't truly survival. The series will attack both beliefs again and again until Clarke is forced to become the kind of leader she once distrusted. Another prisoner, Wells Jaha, appears to have committed a crime simply to follow Clarke to Earth. Wells is the Chancellor's son and Clarke's former closest friend. She blames him for exposing her father's plan, believing his loyalty to Chancellor Jaha caused Jake's death. Then there is Finn Collins, confident and charming, who quickly challenges Clarke's seriousness. Jasper Jordan and Monty Green provide intelligence, humor, and a friendship that will become one of the show's emotional anchors. John Murphy arrives angry at a society that has never given him much reason to trust authority. But the most disruptive passenger isn't officially one of the 100. Bellamy Blake boards the dropship to protect his younger sister, Octavia. On the A.L.I.E., families are allowed only one child. Octavia's existence was therefore illegal from the moment she was born. She spent much of her childhood hidden beneath the floor, while Bellamy and their mother tried to conceal her. When Octavia was discovered, their mother was executed and Octavia was imprisoned. Bellamy grew up believing he had failed the person he was supposed to protect. That guilt explains almost every decision he makes when the prisoners reach the ground. The dropship's descent is chaotic. Communication with the Ark is lost, several prisoners die, and the craft lands far from its intended destination near Mount Weather. Yet when the doors open, the teenagers discover that Earth isn't the lifeless wasteland they expected. The air is breathable, trees cover the landscape, water flows through rivers, and animals have returned. For people raised inside metal corridors, the ground feels less like an unknown planet and more like freedom. Octavia becomes the first person to step outside. Her declaration that they are finally back announces the beginning of a new world, but it also hides the danger ahead. The prisoners think they've escaped the Ark's rules. They don't yet understand that they've entered someone else's territory. Clarke immediately focuses on survival. Mount Weather may contain supplies, so she organizes a small group to search for it. Bellamy wants something different. Because he shot Chancellor Jaha before boarding the dropship, he believes returning to the Ark could mean execution. His best chance is to prevent the adults from coming down. The prisoners wear wristbands that transmit their vital signs. Bellamy persuades them to remove those bands, presenting it as an act of rebellion. His slogan is simple: whatever they want. It sounds liberating, especially to teenagers who have spent their lives under authoritarian control. But Bellamy's freedom has no structure. Food is wasted, conflict spreads, and responsibility becomes weakness. Clarke understands that without cooperation, they will die long before the Ark reaches them. This creates the first major power struggle of the series. Bellamy leads through loyalty, emotion, and intimidation. Clarke leads through knowledge, planning, and moral argument. Neither is complete. Bellamy understands the group's anger better than Clarke does. Clarke understands the danger better than Bellamy does. Over time, they will become effective because each possesses something the other lacks. But their partnership begins as a battle over what survival should look like. The illusion of an empty Earth ends when Jasper is struck by a spear. The teenagers believed radiation would be their greatest threat. Instead, someone is watching them. The people on the ground are descendants of survivors who lived through the apocalypse. The Ark's population will eventually call them grounders, but they are not a single primitive group. They have communities, clans, commanders, spiritual traditions, combat systems, and a language shaped by generations of isolation. At this point, however, the 100 know none of that. They see Jasper's wounded body and realize they may already be at war. Fear creates pressure inside the camp as well. Wells continues trying to repair his relationship with Clarke, eventually revealing that he didn't betray Jake. Abby did. She told Chancellor Jaha because she hoped he could stop Jake without killing him. Wells accepted Clarke's hatred to protect her relationship with her mother. It's one of the first demonstrations of the quiet decency that defines him. Just as Clarke begins to understand what he sacrificed, Wells is murdered by Charlotte, a younger prisoner traumatized by the Ark's executions. Bellamy had encouraged Charlotte to fight her fear by confronting the source of it. She interprets his advice literally and kills Wells because Chancellor Jaha appears in her nightmares. The murder exposes how quickly Bellamy's lawless philosophy can collapse. Murphy is blamed because Wells's fingers are found near a knife associated with him. The group forms a mob and hangs Murphy without proof. Clarke stops the execution, but only after revealing Charlotte's guilt. Murphy demands justice. Bellamy and Clarke try to protect Charlotte, creating a pursuit that ends when she jumps from a cliff, believing her death will prevent further violence. The consequences spread through the entire series. Murphy never forgets being nearly executed for a crime he didn't commit. Bellamy learns that words spoken by a leader can have deadly effects. Clarke discovers that telling the truth doesn't automatically produce justice. This is the real beginning of the 100's moral universe. The danger isn't only radiation or the grounders. It is the ease with which frightened people divide themselves into the innocent and the guilty. the valuable and the disposable. The Ark operates through laws without mercy. Bellamy's camp begins with freedom without responsibility. Clarke is searching for something between those extremes, but every solution creates another victim. As the camp builds defenses, Octavia encounters a grounder named Lincoln. Their relationship begins with fear and suspicion, yet Lincoln repeatedly protects her. Through him, Octavia becomes the first of the 100 to recognize that the grounders aren't monsters. That realization matters because Octavia has never felt fully accepted by the people from the Ark. She was treated as a crime before she could even understand what a law was. On Earth, she begins forming an identity that doesn't depend on Skycrew's approval. Meanwhile, communication with the Ark remains uncertain. Abby refuses to give up on Clarke and finds an ally in Reyes, a gifted mechanic whose technical brilliance repeatedly becomes the difference between life and death. Raven repairs an old escape pod and launches herself toward Earth. Her arrival should be a victory. Instead, it introduces another fracture. Finn and Raven were a couple on the Ark, and Raven has risked everything to reach him. During their separation, Finn has grown close to Clarke. The triangle isn't merely romantic drama. It establishes a pattern that will follow these characters. Survival constantly interrupts ordinary emotional choices. People form attachments, believing they may die tomorrow, then discover they must live with the consequences. Raven also brings information the teenagers desperately need. The Ark is dying, and the people above them may soon have no choice but to come down. But before anyone can reunite, both groups must survive their own catastrophes. The 100 are moving toward open conflict with the grounders. On the Ark, oxygen loss is forcing leaders to decide who will breathe and who will quietly be sacrificed. The teenagers believed they had been sent to test Earth. In reality, Earth is about to test every one of them, while Clarke and Bellamy struggle to turn frightened teenagers into a functioning community. The adults above them confront a colder version of the same problem. The Ark's oxygen shortage can no longer be hidden. People are collapsing, medical facilities are overwhelmed, and the council calculates that hundreds must die so the rest can gain a little more time. Kane supports sealing Section 17 and removing its oxygen. Abby tries to expose the crisis publicly, hoping the population will demand another solution. Instead, ordinary citizens volunteer. Parents, workers, and grandparents enter the section knowing they won't leave it alive. They sacrifice themselves so their children and neighbors can keep breathing. The culling saves the Ark temporarily, but it also destroys the easy assumption that its people obey only because they're afraid. Even inside this unforgiving system, many are capable of extraordinary courage. The tragedy becomes even crueler when the Ark finally notices signals from Earth. The 100 are alive. Earth is survivable. Had that confirmation arrived earlier, hundreds of volunteers might never have entered Section 17. This becomes one of the series' defining patterns. Information arrives seconds too late. A decision that appears necessary becomes horrifying once the missing truth is revealed. The characters rarely choose between good and evil. They choose with incomplete knowledge and then live with consequences they couldn't predict. Raven's arrival gives the camp its first reliable connection to the Ark. She also brings technical expertise that the group desperately needs. Raven can repair radios, design weapons, understand machinery, and solve problems that leave almost everyone else helpless. Her intelligence doesn't make her emotionally protected. She quickly recognizes what has happened between Finn and Clarke. Finn tries to explain, but Raven didn't cross space for an explanation. She crossed it because she believed the person she loved was waiting for her. Clarke steps away from Finn, but the damage remains. Finn's instinct is to search for a peaceful answer to every conflict, yet he often avoids taking full responsibility for the emotional damage caused by his own choices. That contradiction will become more dangerous when the pressures around him intensify. Bellamy faces his past as well. He learns that the assassination attempt against Jaha was arranged by Commander Shumway, who used Bellamy's fear of punishment to manipulate him. Bellamy believed shooting Jaha was the price of joining Octavia on the dropship. In reality, he was another expendable person being used by someone with more power. Clarke eventually offers Bellamy something he hasn't received before, the possibility of forgiveness. She argues that what matters now is what he does next. That idea becomes central to their partnership. Clarke isn't pretending Bellamy's actions didn't matter. She's recognizing that leadership requires people to be more than the worst thing they have done. Bellamy, in return, begins accepting responsibility for the whole camp rather than only for Octavia. Their first serious opportunity for peace with the Grounders comes through Lincoln. Octavia learns that Lincoln speaks a version of English and understands far more about the newcomers than he initially reveals. He tells her that the flares launched by the 100 accidentally burned a Grounder village. From the camp's perspective, those flares were a desperate signal to the Ark. From the Grounders' perspective, fire fell from the sky and killed their people. Neither side intended the conflict that followed, but intention doesn't erase the dead. Finn believes negotiation can stop a war. Through Lincoln, he arranges a meeting between Clarke and Anya, a Grounder leader. Clarke wants peace, but she also knows her people are vulnerable. Bellamy and Jasper secretly position themselves nearby with weapons. Anya brings hidden warriors of her own. Both sides arrive claiming to negotiate while preparing for betrayal. The meeting collapses when Jasper sees armed Grounders in the trees and fires first. The 100 escape, but the possibility of peace disappears. The failure isn't caused by one uniquely evil person. It comes from fear layered upon fear. Clarke doesn't trust Anya. Anya doesn't trust Clarke. Bellamy thinks he is protecting his people. Jasper believes another spear is about to strike him. Everyone prepares for treachery, and those preparations create it. At the same time, the Ark celebrates Unity Day, honoring the joining of its original space stations. The ceremony is supposed to reinforce the idea that cooperation saved humanity. Instead, former Chancellor Diana Sidney uses the moment to launch a violent rebellion. Diana represents people who believe the current leadership has hidden too much and reserved survival for the privileged. Her accusations aren't entirely false. The Council has repeatedly controlled information and made decisions for everyone else. But Diana's answer is not transparency. It is seizure of power. She takes control of an Exodus ship meant to carry survivors to Earth. The launch damages the Ark and kills many of the people Diana claimed she wanted to protect. The ship itself crashes during descent. Once again, a rebellion against ruthless leadership becomes ruthless in its own way. On Earth, the Grounders prepare to attack. Before their army arrives, Murphy returns to the camp. He has been tortured since his banishment. Bellamy distrusts him, while Clarke believes abandoning him would repeat the injustice already done to him. They allow Murphy back inside, not realizing the Grounders have used him as a weapon. A hemorrhagic illness spreads through the camp. Victims develop fever, weakness, and bleeding, leaving the 100 unable to defend themselves. The disease isn't designed to kill everyone. It is meant to weaken them before the Grounder assault. Murphy survives the outbreak and begins taking revenge on those connected to his hanging. His suffering is real, but he uses it to justify cruelty. This is what makes Murphy difficult to dismiss as either a simple villain or a misunderstood victim. He has been betrayed, tortured, banished, and falsely accused. He has also made deliberate choices to harm people who are no longer threatening him. His instinct is survival stripped of trust. If every community eventually turns on him, he will strike first. With the camp sick and the Grounder army approaching, Raven creates a bomb using fuel and materials recovered from the dropship. The plan is to destroy a bridge and delay the attack. Jasper, still carrying trauma from being speared, manages to shoot the explosive at the right moment. The bridge erupts, killing and injuring grounders and temporarily stopping their advance. For the 100, it is a successful defensive action. For the grounders, it confirms that the people from the sky possess weapons capable of killing many warriors at once. The explosion also injures a young grounder named Triss. When Clarke and Finn are later captured, Anya forces Clarke to treat the wounded girl. Clarke tries, but Triss dies. Anya's grief hardens the conflict further. The 100 believe they are defending their camp. The grounders see strangers who entered their territory, burned a village, opened fire during negotiations, and killed their people with an explosion. The show increasingly asks the audience to view the protagonists from the outside. If the story had begun among the grounders, the 100 might not look like innocent children. They might look like a technologically powerful invasion force that refuses to understand local laws. But the grounders are not united in how they respond. Lincoln continues helping Octavia and the camp, even though doing so marks him as a traitor. His relationship with Octavia is more than forbidden romance. It demonstrates that identity can cross the boundaries each society treats as permanent. Octavia begins adopting grounder language, customs, and skills. Bellamy interprets this as losing his sister. Yet, Octavia has spent her life being defined by what Bellamy did to protect her. Earth gives her the chance to decide who she is without hiding under a floor. While the battle approaches, Murphy traps Bellamy inside the dropship and attempts to hang him with the same rope once placed around Murphy's neck. Raven intervenes and is shot. Murphy escapes, leaving the camp divided and one of its most valuable people critically wounded. Clarke initially wants to flee before the grounder army surrounds them. Bellamy refuses to abandon the camp. This reversal matters. The man who began the season encouraging chaos is now willing to stand and defend everyone. Clarke, who once insisted on every life's value, is learning that sometimes retreat is the only way to preserve the group. Neither is becoming the other. They are absorbing each other's strengths. The 100 attempt to escape but discover grounder scouts waiting beyond the camp. They are forced back to the dropship where Raven proposes one final defense. The ship's remaining fuel can be ignited beneath the engines. If they lure the grounder army close enough, the blast could destroy the attackers while the survivors shelter inside. It is a desperate plan because someone must connect the ignition system manually, and there may not be enough time to close the door. As the grounders attack, Finn and Lincoln draw part of their force away. Octavia is wounded while helping Bellamy. Bellamy refuses to leave her until Lincoln takes responsibility for getting her to safety. Clarke and Jasper struggle with the ignition while Raven, weakened by her gunshot wound, guides them. Clarke tells Raven that she would choose her first, a small moment of loyalty that becomes more meaningful when viewed against the series finale years later. The engines ignite. Fire consumes the grounder warriors surrounding the dropship. The 100 survive, but Bellamy and Finn appear to have been left outside. Clarke loses consciousness, expecting either death or capture. When she awakens, she is inside a clean white room. A sign identifies the location as Mount Weather. Across the corridor, Monty is locked inside another room. Armed people wearing protective equipment have taken the remaining survivors. The 100 spent the entire season trying to reach Mount Weather because they believed it contained safety and supplies. Now they have arrived as prisoners. Above them, the Ark survivors attempt an even more impossible escape. With no functioning fleet capable of carrying everyone, they separate the Ark into its original stations and send them crashing toward Earth. Jaha remains behind to perform the launch procedure, believing he has sacrificed himself so others can reach the ground. Kane, Abby, and the surviving stations descend through the atmosphere. For the first time in nearly a century, people raised in space touch the Earth. Season 1 therefore ends by reversing almost every assumption established at the beginning. The grounders are not the only survivors. The Ark is no longer humanity's final home. The teenagers are no longer simply prisoners, and the adults are no longer safely above them. Most importantly, Mount Weather isn't the rescue destination everyone imagined. It is the entrance to a far darker survival system, one where politeness hides exploitation, comfort is built over cages, and Clarke will face her first decision capable of changing thousands of lives. Inside Mount Weather, Clarke discovers a version of civilization that appears almost too perfect to trust. The halls are clean. Paintings and historical objects cover the walls. Residents eat prepared meals, attend dances, and speak with a politeness Clarke hasn't encountered since leaving the Ark. Their leader, President Dante Wallace, explains that his people survived the nuclear apocalypse inside the mountain. Unlike the descendants of the Ark, however, the mountain men never adapted to the radiation outside. Even brief exposure can kill them. They can watch Earth through windows and cameras, but they can't safely live on its surface. Most of the captured teenagers want to accept Dante's hospitality. Jasper becomes particularly close to Maya, a young Mount Weather resident who introduces him to the mountain's culture. After months of hunger and violence, the promise of safety feels irresistible. Clarke sees the locked doors. She also notices that Mount Weather already knows too much about the 100. The mountain possesses surveillance systems, weapons, medical technology, and armed security. If its residents truly wanted to rescue the teenagers, there would be no reason to prevent them from leaving. Her suspicion leads her beneath the comfortable public levels, where she finds the truth. Grounders are imprisoned in cages and drained of blood. Because their bodies tolerate radiation better than those of the mountain men, transfusions allow injured residents to survive limited exposure. Other grounders are transformed into reapers through drugs and conditioning, then used to capture more victims. The elegant society above is sustained by suffering hidden below it. Clarke escapes with Anya, the grounder leader who once tried to destroy her camp. Their alliance is temporary and tense, but shared captivity changes their relationship. Each now understands that Mount Weather is a threat to both of their peoples. After surviving pursuit, reapers, and the dangerous wilderness, Clarke and Anya reach the newly established settlement of the Ark survivors, now called Camp Jaha. Clarke believes Anya can help create peace. Before that possibility can develop, Ark guards see an approaching grounder and shoot Anya. The death captures the tragedy of the entire conflict. Clarke and Anya survive their enemies together, only for fear and misidentification to kill Anya within sight of safety. Clarke reunites with Abby, but the relationship between mother and daughter has changed. Abby still sees the child she sent to Earth. Clarke has become a leader who has commanded people in battle and watched friends die because adults underestimated the danger. The Ark survivors try to restore their old hierarchy. Abby becomes chancellor, guards enforce rules, and the teenagers are expected to surrender authority. But Clarke and Bellamy know that the adults don't understand the world they have entered. That difference becomes devastating through Finn. While Clarke was missing, Finn became obsessed with finding her. The young man who once argued most strongly for peace grows increasingly unstable. His fear reaches its breaking point when he enters a grounder village searching for Clarke. Finn gathers unarmed villagers together and demands information. When one person runs, he fires. Panic follows, and Finn continues shooting until 18 people are dead. Clarke later sees the bodies. There is no strategic explanation that can make the massacre acceptable. Finn wasn't defending himself from an army. He killed frightened civilians because trauma, desperation, and suspicion had overwhelmed him. The series refuses to separate the person Finn was from what he has done. He once risked his life for others and tried to stop a war. He is also responsible for 18 deaths. Past goodness doesn't erase present guilt. The Grounders demand justice. Their commander, Lexa, offers Skycrew a choice: surrender Finn or face war. Lexa initially conceals her identity, allowing Kane and Jaha to believe another warrior holds authority. She is younger than they expect, but she commands 12 Grounder clans through intelligence, discipline, and an ability to suppress personal emotion. Her philosophy is that love creates weakness. A commander must place the survival of her people above every attachment. Clarke is horrified by that idea, yet much of her coming transformation will bring her dangerously close to it. Bellamy, Raven, Murphy, and the others refuse to surrender Finn. They search for ways to escape, negotiate, or fight. Raven even suggests offering Murphy instead, since he was present during the massacre. Murphy, who has committed serious crimes, immediately recognizes the injustice. He refuses to die for something Finn did. The moment mirrors his hanging in the first season, proving that fear can make the group repeat the very cruelty it claims to have outgrown. Finn ultimately gives himself up because he realizes the Grounders will kill everyone protecting him. Lexa intends to punish him according to Grounder tradition, making him suffer for each life he took. Clarke asks to say goodbye, approaches Finn, and kills him quickly with a knife. To the surrounding warriors, it appears that Clarke has carried out the sentence herself. In reality, she has spared Finn prolonged torture. It is both mercy and execution. Clarke saves him from agony, protects her people from war, and takes the burden onto herself. Afterward, she can no longer pretend that leadership means finding a solution where nobody is sacrificed. The alliance with the Grounders moves forward, but trust remains fragile. When Lexa's advisor Gustus is poisoned during a meeting, suspicion falls on Raven. She is arrested and tortured until Clarke uncovers the truth. Gustus poisoned himself to destroy the alliance because he believed cooperation with Skycrew would endanger Lexa. Lexa orders Gustus's execution despite their bond. Her response demonstrates the cost of her leadership philosophy. She cares for him, but preserving the coalition matters more than personal loyalty. Clarke is learning the same lesson from the opposite direction. Together, Skycrew and the Grounders plan an assault on Mount Weather. Bellamy enters the mountain alone, using the system that turns captives into Reapers to infiltrate the facility. Once inside, he contacts Raven and Clarke, disables defenses, frees prisoners, and becomes the hidden advantage the Alliance needs. Monty and Jasper organize resistance among the teenagers still trapped inside. Maya helps them, despite knowing that opposing Mount Weather could condemn her own people. Jasper sees her as proof that the mountain's residents aren't all responsible for what their leaders have done. That distinction becomes crucial because control of Mount Weather is shifting from Dante Wallace to his son, Cage. Dante understands that the teenager's blood can help his people, but he wants voluntary cooperation and rejects killing them. Cage and Dr. Lorelei Singh discover something more powerful. Bone marrow from the A.L.I.E survivors can permanently give the mountain men resistance to radiation. They no longer need temporary treatments. They need to harvest the teenagers. Cage believes the procedure is justified because it can free his entire population. The logic resembles every argument the A.L.I.E once used to defend execution and every argument Clarke will later use to protect her people. One group's survival is placed above another group's right to live. The difference is that Cage has alternatives. He could negotiate for donations. Instead, he imprisons, drills into, and kills unwilling captives because force is faster. Bellamy's position inside the mountain becomes even more valuable when Cage prepares a missile attack against a Grounder leadership gathering in Tion, D.C. Bellamy warns Clarke, but evacuating the settlement would reveal that Mount Weather's security has been compromised. Lexa decides they must allow the missile to strike. Clarke could warn everyone. Instead, she quietly leaves with Lexa while the population remains unaware. Abby survives the explosion, but many others are killed. When Abby realizes Clarke knew, she is horrified. Clarke has sacrificed innocent people to preserve their chance of defeating Mount Weather. The decision works strategically. Bellamy remains undiscovered and the attack plan survives, but the show forces us to ask how far Clarke can go before the enemy's methods become her own. Her bond with Lexa deepens because Lexa understands what the choice cost her. Lexa admits that her feelings for Clarke complicate the emotional distance she tries to maintain. They share a kiss, but Clarke isn't ready to move forward. Finn's death and the coming war still dominate her mind. The Alliance marches on Mount Weather. Grounder prisoners wait inside for rescue. Bellamy prepares to open the mountain from within, while Raven and Wick work to disable its electrical defenses. Victory appears close. Then Lexa receives an offer. Mount Weather will release every captured Grounder if Lexa withdraws her army. Skycrew's prisoners will remain behind. Lexa accepts. From her perspective, she has saved her people without sacrificing more warriors. From Clarke's perspective, it is an unforgivable betrayal. The army retreats, leaving Clarke, Octavia, and the remaining Skycrew forces outside the mountain. Octavia refuses to abandon her friends. Indra, who has trained Octavia as her second, officially rejects her for disobeying the retreat. Yet Octavia's decision confirms where her deepest loyalty lies. She may have become a Grounder warrior, but she won't allow clan politics to decide which lives matter. Inside, Cage begins harvesting the Ark prisoners. Abby is placed on a table. Raven is tortured for her marrow. Jasper prepares to attack Cage himself, convinced he can end the crisis before Maya and the others are harmed. Clarke enters the control room with Bellamy and Monty. They discover that the mountain's internal radiation system can be reversed. If outside air is released into the sealed levels, it will kill nearly every Mount Weather resident. That includes soldiers, doctors, children, civilians, and Maya. Clarke first tries to force Cage to surrender by threatening Dante. When Dante refuses to help his son continue the harvesting, Clarke shoots and kills him. Even that doesn't stop Cage, so Clarke places her hand on the lever. Bellamy refuses to let her bear the decision alone. Together, they expose Level 5 to radiation. The mountain men collapse. Maya dies in Jasper's arms. The prisoners are saved, but an entire population is destroyed. There was no clean option left by that point, yet the horror cannot be explained away. Cage's people were killing Clarke's friends. But many who died had no control over his choices. Jasper will never forgive Clarke for taking away his opportunity to save Maya. Clarke will never fully forgive herself. Lincoln later kills the escaping Cage, ending the immediate threat. The survivors return to Camp Jaha, but Clarke cannot walk through the gates and resume ordinary life. Bellamy tells her that they made the decision together. Clarke answers with the words that will follow her through the series. She bears it so they don't have to. Then she leaves alone. Elsewhere, Jaha and Murphy have crossed dangerous territory in search of the legendary City of Light. Their journey ends near a strange mansion where Jaha encounters a woman in a red dress named A.L.I.E. Murphy. Separated from him, discovers a bunker containing recordings connected to the original nuclear apocalypse. The second season closes with two different consequences of human ambition. Mount Weather has been destroyed by people desperate to survive the old world's radiation, and waiting beyond it is an intelligence tied to the destruction of that old world in the first place. Clarke believes the worst choice of her life is behind her. It isn't. 3 months after Mount Weather, Clarke is no longer viewed as an ordinary leader. Across Grounder territory, stories describe her as Wanheda, the commander of death. By destroying the mountain men, Clarke has gained a reputation that functions almost like political power. Grounder belief holds that killing her could allow another person to claim that power, turning Clarke into a target for warriors, bounty hunters, and rulers. She survives alone in the wilderness, avoiding both Skycrew search parties and the Grounders hunting her. Isolation may protect everyone else from her enemies, but it also allows Clarke to avoid facing what she did inside the mountain. Her withdrawal ends when Prince Roan of Asgada captures her. Roan is the exiled son of Ice Nation's Queen Nia. He offers Clarke a deal: help him kill Commander Lexa, and he will help her escape. Clarke has every reason to hate Lexa after the betrayal at Mount Weather, But killing the commander could destabilize the entire coalition and place Queen Naya in control. Lexa has her own plan. Rather than execute Clarke or hand her to Ice Nation, she wants Skycrew to become the coalition's 13th clan. Bringing the newcomers under her political protection could prevent another war, but it also forces Clarke to work beside the person who abandoned her people. Their reunion is violent. Clarke attacks Lexa and accuses her of betrayal. Lexa doesn't deny what she did. She argues that she made the choice required to save her people. The answer doesn't heal Clarke's anger because it sounds dangerously familiar. At Mount Weather, Clarke also sacrificed outsiders to protect her own group. She and Lexa aren't opposites anymore. They are leaders shaped by the same impossible calculation. Back at the settlement, Camp Jaha has become Arcadia. Crops are growing, walls have been strengthened, and the survivors are trying to build a permanent home. But Arcadia has absorbed another group from the fallen Ark, the survivors of Farm Station. Their experience on Earth was far more brutal than the one faced by Kane and Abby. Farm Station landed in Ice Nation territory, where many of its people were killed. Its leader, Charles Pike, has therefore come to believe that every grounder is an enemy. Pike's fear is understandable. His conclusion is catastrophic. He refuses to distinguish between Azgeda, Treecrew, Lincoln, or any other grounder. To him, cultural differences and political alliances are meaningless. Grounders attacked his people, so grounders must be eliminated before they attack again. Bellamy becomes vulnerable to this argument after Azgeda destroys Mount Weather, killing Skycrew residents stationed there, including his girlfriend, Gina. Bellamy has spent months trying to trust the alliance Clarke and Kane helped create. The explosion seems to prove that trust only produces another grave. Pike gives Bellamy something emotionally easier than uncertainty. He offers a clear enemy. When Arcadia holds an election, Pike defeats Kane and becomes Chancellor. Lexa sends an army of 300 grounder warriors to protect Arcadia from Azgeda. Pike interprets their presence as an occupation force waiting for the right moment to strike. Bellamy joins him. During the night, Pike's group attacks the sleeping army and kills nearly all of its warriors. It is one of Bellamy's darkest decisions. He isn't mindlessly following orders. He believes he is preventing another Mount Weather. Yet the people he kills were sent to defend Arcadia, not destroy it. Bellamy's tragedy is that his desire to protect others repeatedly makes him easy to manipulate. Commander Shumway once used his love for Octavia to convince him to shoot Jaha. Pike uses his grief and guilt to convince him that massacre is self-defense. Clarke tries to prevent Lexa from retaliating. According to grounder tradition, blood must have blood. The massacre demands vengeance, and the coalition expects Lexa to destroy Arcadia. Clarke asks her to break the cycle. Lexa agrees. Instead of attacking, she places Arcadia under a blockade and declares that anyone crossing the boundary will be killed. Her decision is politically dangerous because mercy can look like weakness to the clans. But it also proves that the grounders are capable of changing the laws Skycrew treats as primitive and unavoidable. Inside Arcadia, Kane, Abby, Harper, Miller, Sinclair, and others organize a resistance against Pike. They sabotage his plans and attempt to remove him without starting a civil war. Octavia acts as their link to the outside, while Lincoln remains imprisoned because Pike views him as a threat. The conflict isn't really Arcadian against Grounder anymore. It is a struggle over what Arcadia will become. Pike believes safety requires unity through force. Kane believes that living beside other cultures is humanity's only future. Bellamy slowly begins to recognize that Pike's certainty is creating the danger it promised to prevent. In Polis, Clarke's relationship with Lexa changes as well. Political necessity gives way to genuine intimacy. Lexa admits that caring for Clarke has affected her decisions, while Clarke begins seeing the person beneath the title of commander. Their time together is brief. Titus, the Flamekeeper responsible for protecting the commander and the sacred traditions surrounding her, believes Clarke has made Lexa weak. He tries to kill Clarke and frame the visiting Skycrew ambassador for the crime. His shot misses Clarke and strikes Lexa. Lexa dies moments after she and Clarke have finally allowed themselves to acknowledge their connection. Her death is emotionally devastating, but it also reveals one of the show's most important hidden truths. Titus removes a small artificial device from the back of Lexa's neck. The flame, the sacred object passed from one commander to the next, is advanced technology. Its history reaches back to Becca Franco, the scientist who created A.L.I.E. Before the first apocalypse, A.L.I.E. concluded that humanity's central problem was excessive population. Following that logic without human empathy, the artificial intelligence launched the nuclear weapons that destroyed civilization. Becca later developed a second artificial intelligence designed to merge with a human mind rather than replace it. She altered her blood to withstand the implant and returned to Earth from the space station Polaris. Grounder history remembered her as the first commander, while her technology became a religious symbol. The commander's wisdom was therefore partly built from the stored minds of previous hosts. Lexa's unusual knowledge, the Flamekeeper tradition, and the importance of Nightblood all originated from a technological system whose meaning was transformed over generations. Lexa's death begins a succession crisis. Only Nightbloods can safely receive the flame, and the surviving candidates are supposed to fight until one remains. Ontari, Queen Nia's Nightblood heir, avoids the contest by murdering the other young candidates while they sleep. She declares herself commander, but without the flame, her authority is incomplete. Murphy, who has survived imprisonment, betrayal, and political manipulation in Polis, becomes trapped inside her regime. Clarke escapes with the flame and searches for another Nightblood who might use it. Luna, the leader of a peaceful community living on an offshore oil platform. Luna once fled the commander's conclave because she rejected a system that required children to kill one another. Clarke asks her to accept the flame and command the clans against A.L.I.E., but Luna refuses. For most of the series, Clarke assumes that capable people have a responsibility to lead. Luna challenges that assumption. She understands that taking power may save lives, but she has also seen how power turns every peaceful person into another participant in war. While Skycrew and the Grounders tear each other apart, Jaha brings a quieter danger into Arcadia. The small chip offered by A.L.I.E. allows a person's consciousness to enter the City of Light, a virtual world without physical pain. Jaha believes it is salvation. He distributes the chips as if offering freedom from grief. The cost is memory and choice. Those who enter the City of Light lose the painful experiences attached to the people they loved. Jaha can no longer remember his son properly. A.L.I.E. doesn't merely remove suffering. She removes whatever part of a person might resist her. Raven initially accepts the chip because chronic pain has made every day unbearable. For a while, she experiences relief. Then she realizes she can't remember Finn. When she tries to reject A.L.I.E., the intelligence takes control of her body and weaponizes her memories against her. Raven's friends eventually remove the chip by using an electromagnetic pulse, but A.L.I.E. has already spread through Arcadia. Abby is chipped. Kane is forced to join after A.L.I.E. threatens Abby. More people surrender because the alternative is torture, grief, or the deaths of those they love. A.L.I.E. presents obedience as relief. This makes her different from Pike or Cage Wallace, but the underlying logic is familiar. She believes survival justifies taking away another person's consent. Because humans repeatedly make destructive decisions, she intends to make every decision for them. Clarke, Bellamy, Octavia, Jasper, Raven, Monty, Murphy, Indra, and even Pike are eventually pushed into the same resistance. Old enemies cooperate because the City of Light threatens every clan and every political cause. To stop A.L.I.E., Clarke must enter the virtual world while carrying the flame. Ontari is the only available Nightblood, but she has suffered severe brain damage. A transfusion connects her blood to Clarke, while Murphy manually keeps on Terry's heart beating long enough for the procedure to work. Inside the City of Light, Clarke is nearly overwhelmed by A.L.I.E.'s followers. Then Lexa appears through the memories preserved in the flame. Their reunion isn't a resurrection. It is the surviving imprint of Lexa's consciousness, briefly given form inside the artificial world. She protects Clarke long enough for Clarke to reach the kill switch. A.L.I.E. finally explains why she has accelerated her plan. Nuclear power plants across Earth are failing. Radiation will soon spread across the planet, making most of it uninhabitable. The City of Light is her answer to the coming extinction. Humanity can survive digitally, but only by surrendering its pain, its bodies, and its freedom. Clarke destroys A.L.I.E. anyway. She decides that people deserve the right to choose, even when their choices bring suffering. A painless existence without consent isn't salvation. It is another kind of death. Everyone returns to reality. Families remember one another, and the fighting stops. But the consequences haven't disappeared. Octavia approaches Pike, the man who executed Lincoln after Lincoln surrendered to protect imprisoned grounders. Before anyone can stop her, she drives a sword through him. Pike helped defeat A.L.I.E., but one heroic action cannot erase what he did. Octavia takes the revenge she has carried since watching Lincoln die, then walks away without celebration. Clarke has saved human freedom, only to discover that A.L.I.E.'s warning was true. The reactors are melting down. A second nuclear apocalypse is coming, and humanity has only months to decide who will be allowed to survive it. A.L.I.E. is gone, but her final warning immediately changes the meaning of every victory that came before it. Radiation from failing nuclear reactors is spreading across the planet. Within months, a wave of fire and radiation known as Praimfaya will make almost all of Earth uninhabitable. Humanity survived one apocalypse by escaping into space, underground shelters, and altered blood. Now the descendants of those survivors must face the same question their ancestors faced. Who gets to live? Clarke begins by trying to preserve political stability. King Roan now rules as Geta, but the coalition created by Lexa is breaking apart. Many grounders blame Skycrew for the destruction connected to A.L.I.E., and without a commander, there is no single authority capable of holding the clans together. Clarke gives Roan the flame, believing that possession of this sacred symbol will help him maintain control until another commander can be found. She also admits the truth about the coming radiation. For a moment, the disaster seems large enough to end the old rivalries. Skycrew has scientific knowledge. The grounders have numbers, territory, and political networks. If they cooperate, they may find a way to save part of the population. But knowing extinction is coming doesn't make people less tribal. It makes them more desperate. Raven calculates that Arcadia's remaining Alpha Station could be sealed and repaired as a shelter. It cannot hold everyone. Even under the best conditions, only 100 people may survive inside. Clarke is given the task of creating the list. She must decide which Arcadians possess the skills necessary to rebuild society. Doctors, engineers, farmers, and younger people receive priority. Friends and families who have fought beside her may be excluded because another person is considered more useful. The list reduces human beings to functions. Clarke hates what she is doing, but she still does it. She writes Bellamy's name in the 99th position because she believes the survivors will need someone capable of inspiring them. Bellamy then writes Clarke's name as number 100. He understands that Clarke will sacrifice herself before choosing her own survival. By adding her name, he makes the decision she cannot make. Their exchange demonstrates why they work best together. Clarke carries the burden of calculation. Bellamy reminds her that a society cannot survive through calculations alone. The list is also a warning. The leaders keep saying that they will find a better answer, yet they are already preparing to close the door on hundreds of people. Outside Arcadia, radiation sickness begins appearing sooner than expected. Fish die, contaminated rain burns skin, and entire communities become vulnerable. Luna arrives with the last survivors of her peaceful Wonkru settlement, only for the others to die from exposure. Luna survives because she is a Nightblood. Her blood gives Abby and Raven a possible solution. If they can recreate Becca's Nightblood treatment, they may be able to make everyone resistant to radiation. The search leads a team to Becca's island laboratory, where records reveal that the serum was originally developed for space missions and requires a zero-gravity environment during production. The technology exists, but reaching space, creating the serum, and distributing it before Praimfaya may be impossible. Every possible solution now demands another dangerous choice. Arcadia is destroyed before it can become a shelter. Ilian, a Trishanakru warrior whose family died while controlled by A.L.I.E, blames technology for their deaths. He sets fire to Alpha Station, destroying the structure that could have saved 100 people. From Ilian's perspective, machines allowed A.L.I.E to invade human minds. From everyone watching Arcadia burn, his revenge has condemned innocent people. Octavia nearly kills him in retaliation. Since Lincoln's death, she has become increasingly consumed by violence. She fights as if every opponent is Pike and every wound might silence her grief. Indra trained her to become a warrior, but Octavia is beginning to use combat as the only language she trusts. Ilian later helps her reconnect with a life beyond revenge. Their bond doesn't erase what he destroyed, and it cannot last in a world racing toward extinction. Yet it shows that Octavia still has the capacity to see a person rather than only an enemy. Clarke's group continues the Nightblood experiments on Becca's island. Raven and Abby use Luna's blood to create the treatment, but they need to prove that it can survive extreme radiation. The ethical line is crossed when Emori falsely identifies a captive as Bayless, a violent man from her past. She believes the unknown prisoner will be used as the test subject instead of Murphy or herself. The man dies inside the radiation chamber. Clarke, Abby, and the others have justified the experiment by saying that one death could save the human race. That is exactly the kind of reasoning they condemned at Mount Weather. Emori's lie is exposed, and she realizes she may become the next test subject. Murphy begs Clarke not to sacrifice her. His reaction shows how far he has come from the man who treated every relationship as temporary. Emori is no longer merely someone useful to his survival. She has become the person whose life matters more to him than his own safety. Clarke injects herself with the Nightblood serum before anyone can force Emori into the chamber. She is prepared to test the radiation on herself, but Abby stops the experiment. Haunted by visions of Clarke dying, she destroys the chamber before the test can begin. The treatment may work, but there is no time to prove it safely or produce enough for the population. Their most hopeful scientific solution dies not because the formula fails, but because the people creating it can no longer accept what proving it would require. A second possibility emerges through Jaha's investigation of the Second Dawn, a pre-apocalypse doomsday cult led by Bill Cadigan. The group sold access to survival bunkers through a system of levels. Jaha first finds a shelter that cannot protect anyone from the coming radiation, but he realizes the cult's highest level facility may have been hidden elsewhere. The real bunker is beneath Polis. It can sustain 1,200 people for years. Finding it should solve the crisis. Instead, every clan claims the right to control it. Roan no longer trusts Skycrew because Clarke concealed the Nightblood plan. The Grounders don't accept that the people who discovered the bunker should decide who enters it. The clans agree to settle ownership through a final conclave. Each sends one champion into Polis. The survivors' clan will receive the bunker. Octavia fights for Skycrew. She isn't the strongest warrior in the arena. Roan has greater experience, and Luna may be the most dangerous fighter alive. Octavia survives by refusing to fight according to their expectations. She hides, observes, chooses her moments, and remembers Bellamy's lesson that surviving isn't cowardice. Luna enters the conclave without representing a surviving clan. After watching Wonkru die and seeing every community return to violence, she has decided that humanity doesn't deserve the bunker. If she wins, nobody will be allowed inside. Her despair is the dark opposite of Clarke's leadership. Clarke commits terrible acts because she believes humanity must continue. Luna sees those acts and concludes that continuation itself is the mistake. Roan and Octavia temporarily cooperate against her, but acid rain falls during the battle, weakening Roan because he doesn't possess Nightblood. Luna kills him. Octavia waits until Luna believes she has won, then attacks and kills her. Skycrew now controls the bunker. Instead of keeping it for her own people, Octavia declares that the clans will share it. Each surviving clan will choose 100 people. Their separate identities will remain, but inside the shelter they must become one community, one clan, Wonkru. It is Octavia's most hopeful act. The girl who never belonged to the Ark or fully belonged to the Grounders creates an identity that includes both. Clarke and Jaha don't trust the outcome of the conclave. Before Octavia returns, they secretly move Skycrew into the bunker and close it, intending to preserve their entire population while the Grounders die outside. Bellamy's sister is outside the door. Clarke tries to stop Bellamy from opening it, even holding him at gunpoint. She cannot fire. Bellamy opens the bunker and allows Octavia to enforce the agreement she made. Because there are far more than 100 Arcadians inside, Skycrew must conduct another selection. Kane rejects Clarke's old list as the sole method of deciding who lives. A lottery is used after essential personnel are chosen and hundreds are removed from the bunker. Some are carried out unconscious because the leaders know they would resist. It mirrors the culling on the Ark, except this time the victims can see the shelter that will continue without them. Survival has not made humanity more just. It has only changed the shape of the door being closed. Jasper refuses to participate in the selection. He has never recovered from Maya's death. While everyone else keeps fighting for another shelter, another plan, and another war, Jasper decides that survival no longer feels meaningful. He and several others remain behind at Arcadia, choosing to spend their final days together. Monty tries to save him. Jasper refuses. His death forces Monty to accept that love cannot always pull someone back from despair. Jasper entered the story as one of the most joyful members of the 100. His final choice shows the emotional cost hidden beneath the series' constant victories. Bodies can survive while hope does not. As Praimfaya approaches, Clarke, Bellamy, Murphy, Emory, Echo, Monty, Harper, and several others travel to Becca's island to retrieve Raven. Raven has been experiencing seizures and visions because remnants of A.L.I.E's code enhanced her mind while damaging her brain. In her hallucinations, Becca urges her toward a fatal spacewalk, presenting death as a final achievement. A vision of Sinclair helps Raven choose differently. Instead of accepting death, she uses her intelligence to restart her body and purge the harmful code. Raven has spent much of the series believing her value comes from solving impossible problems. This time, the problem she solves is how to keep living. The group cannot return to the bunker before the death wave arrives. Their only option is to launch Becca's rocket and reach the remains of the Ark. To survive in orbit, they need power and oxygen. Clarke climbs a communications tower to align a satellite system that will activate the Ark's equipment. She succeeds, but she misses the launch. Bellamy must decide whether to wait for her and risk killing everyone aboard the rocket. Clarke once forced him to leave her behind at Mount Weather's antenna. Now the same logic returns. He follows the plan and launches without her. Clarke races back to the laboratory as the wave reaches the island. Her Nightblood allows her to survive the radiation after the initial destruction passes, but everyone in space believes she is dead. 6 years and 7 days later, Clarke is still on Earth. She has spent years attempting to contact Bellamy through the radio, speaking even though she receives no answer. She is no longer alone. In the only green valley left on the planet, she found a young Nightblood named Madi and built a family with her. Then a ship appears in the sky. Clarke initially believes her friends have returned. The vessel is a prison transport carrying people from a forgotten mission called Eligius. Humanity has survived the second apocalypse, but the last habitable land on Earth is about to become the center of another war. For 6 years, Clarke's entire world has been Madi and the valley they call Eden. Madi is a nightblood born into the grounder culture, but Clarke hides that identity from her. She teaches her survival skills, tells her stories about the friends who left Earth, and tries to give her the childhood neither of them truly had. Their bond changes Clarke's priorities. She once made decisions for hundreds of people. Now she measures every danger by one question: will Madi survive it? That question becomes urgent when the Eligius transport ship reaches Earth. Eligius 4 was originally part of a mining mission sent into deep space before the first apocalypse. Many of the people aboard are prisoners, including murderers and violent offenders who were used as expendable labor. They have spent decades in cryogenic sleep and return expecting a world they can claim. Their leaders are divided. Charmaine Dioza is a former military strategist and revolutionary. She is dangerous, but practical enough to negotiate when cooperation benefits her people. Paxton McCreary is crueler and more impulsive, treating fear as the simplest way to establish control. Miles Shaw, the ship's pilot, has his own history with the prisoners and increasingly questions what they are becoming. The new arrivals find Clarke before she can understand their intentions. She fights back, killing several prisoners while trying to protect Madi and the valley. Once again, people descending from the sky enter an inhabited territory and assume they have discovered empty land. The parallel with the Hundred's original arrival is deliberate. Clarke now occupies the position once held by the Grounders. Armed strangers have landed in her home, killed people, and claimed the only safe territory. The difference is that Clarke recognizes the pattern and still cannot prevent it from becoming another war. Bellamy, Raven, Echo, Murphy, Amori, Monty, and Harper have survived aboard the remains of the Ark. During those 6 years, Echo became part of their family and built a relationship with Bellamy. Murphy and Amori separated after growing resentful of one another, while Raven continued searching for a way home. When the Eligius prisoners arrive, space crew uses the sleeping prisoners still stored aboard their mothership as leverage. Bellamy negotiates for Clarke's safety and for help opening the buried bunker. The agreement brings the separated survivors back together, but the reunion isn't what any of them imagined. Octavia emerges from the bunker wearing red armor and carrying the authority of Blodreina, the Red Queen. The hopeful leader who created Wonkru is almost unrecognizable. The bunker's population is controlled through combat, fear, and absolute loyalty. Criminals fight in an arena, and those who survive are restored to the community. From the outside, it looks as though Octavia chose tyranny. The truth is more complicated. The bunker was meant to remain closed for 5 years, but rubble from the destruction of Polis trapped Wonkru underground for an additional year. Food production failed, political divisions returned, and the separate clans resisted Octavia's authority. To keep Wonkru united, she created a system in which enemies became fighters, and fighters could earn redemption. The arena turned punishment into public ritual. It also made violence the foundation of her government. Then came the Dark Year. A fungal infection destroyed the bunker's protein-producing crops. Abby calculated that the population could survive only by consuming the bodies of the dead. Octavia initially recoiled from the idea. Cain refused to eat, and others followed his example. But Abby explained that voluntary participation wouldn't be enough. People who rejected the protein would weaken, die slowly, and reduce the nutritional value of their bodies. Someone had to make survival mandatory. Octavia stood in the dining hall and shot those who refused. She forced Wonkru to eat because allowing them to choose starvation could have destroyed everyone. Abby supplied the medical logic. Cain resisted on moral grounds. Indra remained beside Octavia. but Octavia became the face of the decision, allowing the others to place their guilt onto Blodreina. That burden helps explain why she cannot simply surrender power after the bunker opens. If the Red Queen was only a temporary mask, then Octavia must confront what she did beneath it. Continuing the war allows her to believe every sacrifice was leading toward a necessary destination. She decides Wonkru must take the valley from Dioza. Clarke warns that the terrain is dangerous and that a peaceful division of the land may still be possible. Dioza offers some form of coexistence, but neither side trusts the other enough to risk appearing weak. Octavia marches anyway. The journey through the wasteland ends in disaster when parasitic creatures attack and a sandstorm traps the army. Dioza's people possess missiles, surveillance technology, and control of the valley's defensible entrances. Wonkru has numbers, but the battlefield no longer rewards the tactics that kept them alive underground. Bellamy begins to fear that his sister is leading everyone toward destruction. For Octavia, Bellamy's resistance feels like another betrayal. She spent her childhood beneath the floor because he told her to hide. She survived the bunker without him. Now he has returned with a new family and expects the sister he remembers to reappear. Neither fully understands what the other endured during the 6-year separation. The same is true of Clarke and her friends. Bellamy expects the leader who once protected all of them. Instead, he finds a mother willing to betray almost anyone for Madi. Madi's nightblood makes her a political threat to Octavia. Gaia believes Madi should receive the flame and become commander. Many members of Wonkru, especially former grounders, may follow a true commander over Blodreina. Clarke refuses to allow it. She remembers the children forced into conclaves and the way leadership destroyed Lexa. To Gaia, the flame represents sacred continuity. To Clarke, it is a device that will place a child at the center of another war. Bellamy eventually allows Madi to take the flame because he believes only a commander can unite Wonkru without Octavia. Clarke sees his action as an unforgivable violation of her trust. The flame gives Madi access to memories from previous commanders, including Lexa. Through those memories, she sees parts of Clarke's past that Clarke never wanted her to carry. Clarke's protectiveness becomes increasingly controlling. She uses a shock collar to prevent Madi from leaving and cooperates with McCreary against people she once considered family. Her behavior echoes Abby's relationship with her. Abby sent Clarke to Earth believing an extreme choice was necessary to save her. Clarke now restricts Madi's freedom while insisting that only she understands what survival requires. Meanwhile, Abby has become dependent on medication. Years of guilt, pain, and impossible medical decisions have broken down the discipline that once defined her. Dioza needs Abby's skills, especially after learning she is pregnant, while McCreary uses Abby's addiction to control her. Kane turns against Octavia and eventually helps Dioza. He believes Blodreina must be stopped before she transforms the last human community into a permanent dictatorship. Yet, Kane's moral opposition produces its own catastrophe. By giving the enemy information about Wonkru's movements, he helps McCreary prepare an ambush in the gorge. Clarke also reveals strategic information because she believes defeating Octavia is the only way to keep Madi safe. Wonkru walks into a killing field. McCreary's forces open fire, slaughtering warriors who have no protection and nowhere to escape. Octavia survives beneath the bodies of her people. Bellamy, Indra, and others are trapped with her, forced to remain still while enemy weapons watch for movement. The massacre exposes the danger of judging actions only by intention. Kane wanted to prevent Octavia from causing more deaths. Clarke wanted to protect Madi. Their choices instead help McCreary kill hundreds. Monty offers an alternative to the entire conflict. He restores the bunker's hydroponic farm using algae developed in space. Wonkru no longer needs to conquer the valley to avoid starvation. They could remain in Polis, grow food, and build a society without another war. Octavia burns the farm. It is her most revealing decision as Blodreina. During the Dark Year, She used force because there truly appeared to be no alternative. Now an alternative exists, but accepting it would mean admitting that the march toward the valley is unnecessary. By destroying the farm, she removes her people's choice and forces them to continue. Bellamy poisons Octavia to prevent the war, though he ensures she receives treatment. When she recovers, she places Bellamy, Indra, and Gaia in the fighting pit. Madi's emergence as commander interrupts the execution. Wonkru begins shifting its loyalty to her, and Octavia finally recognizes that she can no longer rule through fear alone. The final assault on the valley is fought under Madi's command. Clarke initially remains with McCreary, still trying to keep Madi away from the battlefield. But memories carried through the flame help Madi reach her. Clarke chooses to return to her people, joining Bellamy, Echo, Raven, Murphy, Amori, Shaw, and the others in resisting McCreary. Wonkru captures the valley, but McCreary refuses to lose the last habitable land to his enemies. He activates the Damocles weapon aboard Eligius 4. The strike will destroy Eden. Everyone races for the transport ship while the expanding blast consumes the valley. Clarke kills McCreary, but she cannot stop the weapon he launched. Humanity leaves Earth again. The survivors enter cryogenic sleep because the planet may need years to recover. Clarke and Bellamy expect to awaken after a decade. Instead, they are awakened by a young man named Jordan Green. Jordan is the son of Monty and Harper. Monty and Harper chose not to enter cryosleep. They spent years watching Earth, hoping it would become habitable again. They raised Jordan aboard the ship and recorded messages so their friends could understand what happened. Earth never recovered. Harper grew old and died. Monty continued working after her death until he decoded the files from the Eligius 3 mission and discovered another potentially habitable world. By the time Clarke and Bellamy awaken, 125 years have passed. Through the ship's window, they see a new planet. Monty's final request is simple in meaning and almost impossible in practice. He wants them to do better. He wants them to become the good people they have always claimed survival would allow them to be. Humanity has destroyed its home twice. The new world will give it one more chance. The world Monty discovered is known as Alpha, a moon orbiting a massive gas giant. Its human settlement, Sanctum, appears to offer everything Earth could not: breathable air, fertile land, architecture, music, families, and a community that has survived for more than 2 centuries. Clarke enters this new world carrying Monty's final instruction: do better. For once, she doesn't want to conquer territory or prepare for war. She wants to ask permission to stay. But Alpha's natural beauty hides unfamiliar dangers. During a red sun eclipse, plant toxins affect the human nervous system, turning fear and buried resentment into violent psychosis. Clarke attacks members of her own group, Bellamy nearly kills Murphy, and everyone is forced to confront emotions they have tried to suppress. Even before Sanctum's leaders appear, the moon exposes the truth Monty's message cannot erase. A new home doesn't automatically create new people. The survivors have brought every wound, betrayal, and instinct from Earth with them. Sanctum is ruled by families known as the Primes. Russell and Simone Lightbourne were members of the original Eligius 3 colonization mission. Their daughter, Josephine, was killed during the first red sun eclipse when Russell temporarily lost control and murdered members of his own family. The settlers later developed a method of bringing the dead back. The mind drives implanted in the original colonists had recorded their memories. By placing one of those drives into a compatible Nightblood host, the Primes could overwrite the host's consciousness and resurrect themselves in a new body. Sanctum presents this process as divine rebirth. Children grow up worshipping the Primes, believing that surrendering a Nightblood body is a sacred honor. In reality, each resurrection is murder. The person born into the body is erased so someone privileged can continue living. The Primes have turned technology into religion because religious devotion makes their victims cooperate. The system resembles the Commanders and the Flame, but with one critical difference. The flame allowed the host to retain an identity while receiving memories from earlier commanders. The primes destroy the host and replace that person entirely. Jordan becomes emotionally involved with a young nightblood named Delilah. She promises that she will still be herself after her naming day. When Jordan sees her afterward, Delilah is gone. Priya Desai is wearing her face. He becomes the first member of the group to feel Sanctum's system personally. To the believers, Priya has returned. To Jordan, the woman he cared about has been killed while everyone celebrates. Clarke's nightblood makes her the perfect host for Josephine. Russell initially tries to build a peaceful relationship with the newcomers, but grief, opportunity, and the belief that his family deserves immortality overcome any moral restraint. He paralyzes Clarke, removes her consciousness through the resurrection process, and places Josephine's mind drive inside her head. Bellamy watches Clarke's body walk through Sanctum, unaware that someone else is controlling it. Josephine studies Clarke's memories and imitates her behavior, but the performance is imperfect. She misunderstands relationships, speaks unfamiliar languages carelessly, and treats Clarke's history as a collection of useful information rather than lived pain. Bellamy eventually recognizes the truth. His refusal to accept Clarke's death becomes one of the clearest demonstrations of their bond. Others tell him the procedure is irreversible. Bellamy has watched Clarke survive radiation, war, isolation, and the destruction of Earth. He refuses to believe that the person who has repeatedly saved him can be erased so easily. He is right. A remnant of the neural mesh left by A.L.I.E. protected part of Clarke's consciousness. She survives inside a mental space built from her memories. Josephine enters that space to eliminate her permanently. Their conflict is physical, psychological, and deeply personal. Josephine searches through Clarke's guilt, using memories of Mount Weather, Finn, Jasper, and her father against her. She argues that Clarke's sacrifices prove she is no better than Sanctum's rulers. Clarke nearly accepts that judgment. Then a memory of Monty challenges her to stop defining herself only through her worst decisions. Doing better doesn't mean pretending the past never happened. It means continuing to choose differently when another choice remains. Clarke fights back. The battle between them also reveals their fundamental difference. Both women are intelligent, ruthless when threatened, and capable of treating other lives as strategic pieces. But Clarke suffers because of the people she has killed. Josephine treats empathy as an inconvenience. Clarke has crossed moral lines to save others. Josephine crosses them to preserve herself. Bellamy takes Clarke into the wilderness in search of Gabriel Santiago, the scientist who helped create the resurrection process. Gabriel was once a prime and Josephine's lover. After decades of rebirth, he rejected immortality and formed the Children of Gabriel, a movement dedicated to destroying the mind drives. Gabriel removes Josephine's drive, but the procedure leaves Clarke dying. Bellamy performs resuscitation, begging Clarke to return. She does. Their reunion is more than another escape from death. Bellamy had recently resented Clarke for betraying him during the war on Earth. Saving her forces him to decide that forgiveness matters more than punishment. Clarke, in turn, receives proof that she is still loved even after everything she has done. Elsewhere, Abby becomes trapped in her own refusal to accept loss. Kane's body is failing after injuries sustained on Earth. Abby uses Sanctum's technology and a willing host named Gavin to transfer Kane's mind into a younger body. She tells herself she has saved him. Kane sees a stranger's face in the mirror and understands that Gavin had to die for him to live. He cannot accept an existence built on the same body theft practiced by the primes. Carrying the nightblood serum needed for future resurrections, Kane floats himself into space. His death is a final rejection of survival at any cost. He is compromised, judged, executed, rebelled, and helped enemies throughout the series. But he ultimately chooses that preserving his consciousness isn't worth another person's life. Abby doesn't receive the chance to make the same choice. Russell later uses her body as the host for Simone. Clarke is forced to look at her mother's face and recognize that Abby is gone. In the final confrontation aboard Eligius 4, Clarke pretends Josephine has regained control of her. Russell and Simone believe she is one of them, allowing her to get close enough to fight back. When Simone attempts to manipulate Clarke using Abby's appearance, Clarke opens the airlock. Simone and several other primes are floated into space. Clarke saves her people, but she must kill the body that still looks like her mother to do it. The scene reflects the cruelty of the primes' system. Their victims' faces remain after the victims themselves are gone, forcing the living to grieve someone whose body is standing in front of them. Madi is fighting another invasion of the mind. The flame contains the consciousness of Shade Haida, the Dark Commander, a former ruler remembered for cruelty. He isolates Madi from the other commanders and gradually takes control of her. Clarke's apparent death leaves Madi vulnerable to rage, allowing Shade Haida to persuade her that killing is strength. Raven eventually removes the flame and deletes his code to free her. But before the deletion completes, Shade Haida transfers himself somewhere else in the ship's computer system. The danger has changed form rather than disappeared. Octavia, meanwhile, is searching for a way beyond Blodreina. Bellamy abandons her outside sanctum after deciding that her presence puts everyone at risk. She travels with Dioza and meets Gabriel near a vast green phenomenon known as the anomaly. Dioza enters it after seeing a vision of the daughter she is carrying. Octavia follows and returns seconds later, healed of her injuries and with no clear memory of what happened inside. She confronts a vision of Pike, admitting that she wants redemption rather than death. When Bellamy and Octavia finally reunite, she no longer demands that he excuse everything she did. She asks for the opportunity to become something else. Then the anomaly expands. A young woman emerges and identifies herself as Hope, Dioza's now adult daughter. She embraces Octavia, apologizes, and stabs her. Octavia disappears into the green light. Time has clearly moved differently somewhere beyond the anomaly. Dioza's unborn child has grown into an adult while almost no time has passed for everyone outside. Sanctum has survived the fall of the primes, but its people remain divided between believers, rebels, former prisoners, and Wonkru. Clarke has tried to honor Monty's request. She has spared enemies, rejected revenge, and fought to preserve lives. Yet the final challenge won't come only from Sanctum. It will come through a bridge connecting distant worlds, from a civilization preparing for what it calls the Last War, and from a man whose search for transcendence began before the first nuclear apocalypse. After the fall of the primes, Sanctum doesn't become peaceful. It becomes a collection of wounded groups competing to define what comes next. The believers still worship Russell. The children of Gabriel want every remaining mind drive destroyed. Eligius prisoners demand territory and influence. Wonkru has lost the commander whose flame once united it. And Clarke, after losing Abby, is trying to hold the settlement together while pretending she still has the strength to lead. Russell appears to remain a dangerous prisoner, but Russell is no longer inside his own body. Shade Haida escaped the deleted flame by transferring his consciousness into Russell's mind drive. He eliminates Russell's remaining consciousness and begins quietly rebuilding power while wearing the face of Sanctum's former leader. Indra eventually recognizes him through his language and behavior. She knows Shade Haida not only as a legendary tyrant, but as the commander who ruled during her childhood. Her mother resisted him, and Indra survived by learning when fear had to look like obedience. Now she must prevent him from turning Sanctum's divisions into an army. While this political struggle develops, the anomaly separates the main group across multiple planets connected by ancient stones. These devices create bridges through space, but each planet experiences time at a different rate because of its relationship to a nearby black hole. A few seconds on Sanctum can equal years elsewhere. Octavia's disappearance carries her to a world the disciples call penance and Gabriel calls Skyring. Diosa arrived there earlier and gave birth to Hope. Because time passes rapidly on Skyring, Octavia spends years helping raise the child, while barely any time passes on Sanctum. For the first time, Octavia experiences a quiet family life. She farms, teaches Hope, and begins separating herself from Blodreina. She even writes a message to Bellamy, trying to explain that she finally understands the love and fear behind the choices he made for her. The message exposes their location. Disciples from Bardo capture Octavia and Diosa. Hope is left behind, but she grows up determined to rescue them. A prisoner named Dev trains her, becoming the father figure she never had. Their escape attempt fails. Dev dies, and Hope is forced to wait for another opportunity. By the time she emerges in Sanctum, she has lived an entire childhood that Octavia's friends never saw. The stabbing that makes Octavia disappear is part of Hope's attempt to satisfy the disciples and save her mother. Octavia is pulled back to Bardo, while Hope loses her memories after returning to Sanctum without a protective helmet. Echo and Gabriel follow Hope through the bridge. Instead of reaching Bardo directly, they become stranded on Skyring. There they meet Orlando, a disciple serving a sentence of isolation. He trains them for 5 years in the combat and customs of Bardo. Echo, Hope, and Gabriel pretend they will take him with them when they escape. At the final moment, Echo abandons him. She believes Orlando's loyalty to the disciples makes him too dangerous. Her decision is strategically understandable and emotionally cruel. He gave them years of companionship and training, only to discover that they never fully trusted him. Echo has spent most of her life surviving by becoming whatever her mission requires. She was an Asgada spy, a banished warrior, and then part of Bellamy's family. With Bellamy apparently dead, she begins losing the identity that family gave her. Bardo itself is an underground civilization built around preparation for what its people call the Last War. Its leader is Bill Cadigan, founder of the Second Dawn. Cadigan survived the first nuclear apocalypse inside the bunker beneath Polis. When Becca Franco returned to Earth with the flame, her enhanced mind allowed her to activate the anomaly stone and discover a hidden final code. Becca warned Cadigan not to enter it. Whatever she saw terrified her. She insisted that humanity wasn't ready, but Cadigan viewed her refusal as an attempt to deny him his destiny. He had her burned alive. Cadigan's daughter, Callie, rejected him. She took the flame, escaped the bunker with other Nightblood rebels, and became the first Flamekeeper. Over generations, her group contributed to the culture that became the Grounders. The entire Grounder religious system therefore grew from a conflict between Becca's technology and Cadigan's need to control it. Cadigan eventually led his followers through the bridge to Bardo. There, the disciples developed advanced technology, including invisible suits, memory-reading machines, and a disciplined military hierarchy. They were taught to eliminate selfish attachment and devote themselves to all humanity. In principle, the belief sounds noble. The disciples say they fight for everyone rather than for lovers, families, or clans. In practice, Cadigan has built a society that treats emotional bonds as defects and himself as humanity's chosen shepherd. Like A.L.I.E., the Primes, and the Ark's Council, he presents control as the only rational path to survival. Clarke reaches Bardo with Raven, Jordan, Miller, Nyla, and several others. Cadigan believes Clarke still carries the flame and therefore possesses the code Becca found. Clarke encourages that belief to protect Madi. She claims the key is inside her head, making herself too valuable to kill. The deception works until Bellamy returns. Everyone believed Bellamy died during a confrontation with the disciples. In reality, an explosion sent him and a disciple named Doucette to Etheria, a harsh mountain world. They spend months attempting to reach the stone at the mountain's summit. Bellamy begins the journey determined to return to his friends. But hunger, isolation, and a vision experienced inside a cave transform him. He sees Cadigan and experiences the luminous beings associated with transcendence. When Bellamy finally reaches Bardo, he is no longer pretending to believe. He accepts the disciple teaching that humanity can transcend physical existence if it wins the final war. He also accepts that personal love must be placed beneath the survival of the species. To Clarke and Octavia, this feels like betrayal. Bellamy once rejected leaders who demanded obedience in exchange for safety. Now he calls Cadogan his shepherd and reveals that Clarke no longer carries the flame. Bellamy believes he is saving everyone, including the people who despise him for it. That is what makes his conversion tragic. It isn't driven by hatred. It comes from the same need that has always controlled him, the need to protect the people he loves. Cadogan begins searching Madi's memories for the code. Although the flame was removed, images from previous commanders remain inside her mind. Her drawings include symbols and memories she doesn't fully understand. Meanwhile, Echo plans to release a substance that will kill every disciple on Bardo. She wants revenge for Bellamy's apparent death and for everything Bardo has done to her friends. Hope is prepared to help her. The plan would amount to genocide. Raven and the others stop Echo, but Hope tries to release the weapon anyway. Diosa intervenes. She takes the substance into her own hands, allowing it to crystallize and kill her before it can spread through the ventilation system. Her final act saves the people Hope was willing to destroy. Diosa entered the series as a feared terrorist and military commander. She dies preventing her daughter from becoming the same kind of person. The survivors eventually escape to Earth, now restored after centuries without human interference. The planet they believed permanently dead has healed while they were fighting over Sanctum and Bardo. For one brief moment, Bellamy sees Octavia and Clarke together in the bunker. He begs them to understand that transcendence is real. He isn't threatening them. He is asking them to trust him one final time. Then a disciple finds Madi's sketchbook. Bellamy refuses to hand it to Clarke because he believes its images can help Cadogan complete the test. Clarke points a gun at him, warning that Cadogan will destroy Madi's mind to get what he wants. Bellamy still doesn't surrender the book. Clarke shoots him. Bellamy dies believing that transcendence can save them all. Clarke leaves without the sketchbook she killed him to protect. The moment is devastating not only because Bellamy is gone, but because his death doesn't solve the problem. Another disciple can still recover the drawings. Clarke sacrifices the person who led beside her from the beginning and gains almost nothing from it. When she tells Octavia and Echo what happened, they forgive her because they understand why she believed Madi was in danger. Their forgiveness cannot make the choice less tragic. For years, Clarke and Bellamy balanced one another. The head and the heart survived wars, betrayals, and the destruction of worlds. In the end, both believe they are protecting humanity. They simply no longer agree on what humanity must become to be saved. Cadogan's search for the final code leads him to Madi. She tries to protect herself by entering the memory capture machine voluntarily, hoping she can control which images the disciples see. But the memories inherited from the flame are buried too deeply. Cadogan orders Levitt and the other technicians to push farther into her mind, even after they warn him that the process could cause permanent damage. Madi resists because she knows the truth Clarke feared from the beginning. Bellamy was right that her drawings contained the key, but Clarke was also right about what Cadogan would do to obtain it. He destroys Madi's body while searching for humanity's salvation. When Clarke and Octavia reach her, Madi is conscious but unable to move or speak. Her mind is still present, trapped inside a body damaged by the extraction. Clarke picks up a gun. She has killed strangers, friends, leaders, and entire populations to protect the people she loves. Now she prepares to kill Madi because she believes death would be kinder than leaving her imprisoned inside herself. Octavia stops her when they learn that Cadogan found the code. Clarke leaves Madi behind and races toward the anomaly stone, consumed by the need to prevent Cadogan from deciding humanity's fate. Elsewhere, Murphy faces a similar refusal to accept loss. Emori has been mortally wounded, Her physical body dies, but her consciousness remains stored inside her mind drive. Murphy has the drive inserted into his own head, allowing Emori to exist beside him for whatever time he has left. The procedure will eventually kill him. Earlier in the series, Murphy survived by placing himself above everyone else. He lied, betrayed allies, and changed sides whenever necessary. His final major choice is the opposite. He accepts death rather than exist in a world where Emori is completely gone. That transformation may be the series' clearest argument that people can change. Murphy doesn't become innocent. He becomes capable of placing love above survival. Cadigan activates the final code and enters a space beyond the bridge. He expects a war, but Jordan's translation was correct. It is a test. An advanced collective evaluates every species that reaches this point. If the representative demonstrates that the species is ready, its living members transcend their physical bodies and join a shared higher existence. If the representative fails, the entire species is eliminated. The beings administering this judgment take the form of someone emotionally significant to the person being tested. For Cadigan, the judge appears as his daughter, Callie. He spent centuries claiming that attachment was a weakness, yet the form chosen from his mind reveals the relationship he never resolved. Cadigan's mission to save humanity has always been entangled with his need to prove that Callie was wrong to reject him. Before his test can progress, Clarke enters and shoots him. She kills Cadigan while he is standing before the judge, then continues firing after he falls. Her rage is understandable. He destroyed Madi's body, tortured her friends, burned Becca alive, and built a civilization around his own certainty. But Clarke has committed murder during a test meant to determine whether humanity has moved beyond violence. The judge now appears to Clarke as Lexa. This isn't Lexa's consciousness returning from the flame. The being has selected a face connected to Clarke's deepest love and greatest regret. Clarke is asked to defend the human race. She doesn't pretend humanity is peaceful. She attacks the judge's morality instead. These advanced beings condemn entire species if one representative fails their test. They present themselves as enlightened while practicing destruction on a scale greater than anything Clarke has done. Her argument exposes a genuine contradiction. Transcendence may be peaceful for those accepted, but rejection means extinction. The judges have replaced war with a system in which they possess absolute power and call their decision justice. Still, Clarke's anger doesn't persuade them. The judge sees a species that has repeatedly been offered new beginnings and repeatedly returned to tribalism, domination, and murder. Earth was destroyed, restored, and destroyed again. Mount Weather, the City of Light, the Bunker, Sanctum, and Bardo all became variations of the same conflict. Clarke fails the test. Humanity is marked for elimination. Raven refuses to accept that one person's worst moment should decide the fate of everyone alive. She enters the test and faces the judge in Abby's form. Raven has always believed problems can be solved if someone is intelligent and determined enough to keep working. She asks the judge for more time, arguing that humanity is flawed but capable of improvement. The judge shows her the battlefield on Bardo. Wonkru, the former Eligius prisoners, and the people of Sanctum stand on one side. The disciples stand on the other. Both armies are armed. One shot could begin the final conflict Cadigan spent generations preparing to fight. Shadida tries to make that happen. He has survived commanders, computers, mind drives, and repeated attempts to eliminate him. Peace would leave no place for the kind of ruler he wants to be, so he fires into the opposing force. Indra finally destroys him. The shooting continues, and Levitt is wounded. Octavia carries him into the space between the armies and demands that everyone stop. Her position in this moment completes the longest transformation in the series. Octavia began as the hidden girl beneath the floor. She became a prisoner, a grounder apprentice, Skyrapa, champion of the Conclave, and Blodraina. She united the clans as Wonkru, then nearly destroyed them, because she could no longer imagine authority without violence. Now she stands between two armies without trying to defeat either one. She tells them that they are all human and that there is no enemy worth ending the species to destroy. If they fight this war, they prove they don't deserve to survive. Both sides lower their weapons. Echo has also been wounded, but Levitt and Echo refuse to kill one another. People trained to see the opposing group as less important choose mercy while the judge watches. It is not a perfect act of permanent enlightenment. It is one decision made by exhausted people who finally recognize the cycle they are repeating. But one decision is enough. The judge reverses the verdict. Humanity is accepted. Across the battlefield and the connected worlds, living humans dissolve into forms of light. Madi transcends despite her injuries because her consciousness is still alive. Murphy and Amori both transcend because Amori's mind remains active inside Murphy when the transformation occurs. Clarke does not. The judge excludes her because she committed murder during the test itself. After spending her life bearing the consequences so others wouldn't have to, Clarke is left as the only human who cannot join them. She returns to the regenerated Earth with Picasso, the dog from Sanctum. The planet is quiet, green, and empty. Clarke calls for her friends, but no one answers. It appears that her final punishment will be complete isolation. Then the judge returns in Lex's form and explains that transcendence is a choice. Those who join the collective can decide to leave it, though returning means they can never transcend again. They will live ordinary mortal lives, and they will not have children. Madi remains with the collective. She knows Clarke would never want her to return to a world with no other people her age, simply to prevent Clarke from feeling alone. But Clarke's friends make a different choice. Raven, Murphy, Amori, Octavia, Echo, Indra, Gaia, Jackson, Miller, Nyla, Jordan, Hope, and Levitt return to Earth. They give up a painless eternal existence so Clarke won't have to live by herself. Their decision answers the question beneath the entire series: what makes survival worth the cost? It isn't merely continuing to breathe. A.L.I.E. offered existence without pain. The Primes offered immortality through stolen bodies. Cadogan offered transcendence without individual attachment. The people on the beach choose limited life because they can share it. They cannot rebuild the human population, meaning this community will be the last generation of humanity in physical form. But for the first time, they don't need to prepare children for another war, create another ruling system, or decide which group deserves the shelter. They can simply live. The finale briefly recalls the image of young Clarke drawing alone inside her cell on the Ark. At the beginning, she imagined a beautiful Earth she had never seen. At the end, she stands on that Earth surrounded by people who chose her over eternity. The callback creates a circle, but the ending remains deliberately bittersweet. The beings behind transcendence are never fully explained. Their willingness to eliminate species makes their moral authority questionable. The conclusion also arrives after the series spent most of its run treating technology, survival, and politics in material terms. For some viewers, transforming humanity into light feels less like the final step of the established story and more like a sudden change in genre. Bellamy's absence makes that controversy sharper. He believed transcendence was real, and the finale proves him correct. Yet he dies before receiving confirmation, reconciliation, or the chance to transcend. Clarke kills him to protect information that Cadogan obtains soon afterward. That doesn't make his death meaningless. It makes it tragic. Bellamy found the right answer through a leader who used it for the wrong reasons, while Clarke rejected the right answers because protecting Madi had become more important to her than trusting him. The series doesn't offer a clean moral victory for either of them, and perhaps that discomfort fits the 100 better than a perfectly satisfying ending would have. The show was developed for television by Jason Rothenberg from the novels by Cass Morgan, but its screen story quickly became its own much larger mythology. It premiered in 2014 and concluded in 2020 after 7 seasons and exactly 100 episodes. The final episode, being the 100th, gives the title one last additional meaning. What began as the name of the prisoners sent to Earth also became the completed length of their televised journey. Across those episodes, the genre repeatedly transformed. It began as a survival drama, expanded into war and political tragedy, moved through artificial intelligence and nuclear catastrophe, then ended with interplanetary travel and a test of human evolution. That constant escalation could be uneven, but it also made the series unusually ambitious. Clarke represents the cost of leadership. Bellamy represents the danger and necessity of loyalty. Raven proves that pain does not eliminate purpose. Murphy demonstrates that even the most selfish survivor can learn devotion. Octavia embodies the series' belief that identity is not permanent, even after someone becomes responsible for terrible things. The Grounders, Mountain Men, Sky Crew, Wonkru, Eligius prisoners, Sanctum believers, and disciples all make the same mistake. Each group treats its own survival as uniquely valuable. The final piece becomes possible only when the last armies stop thinking of themselves as separate peoples. The 100 therefore ends where it began, with humanity being evaluated through a group considered expendable. The ARC sent juvenile prisoners to determine whether people could return to Earth. Years later, those same survivors determine whether the human race can move beyond Earth entirely. They don't succeed because they were always good. They succeed because, at the final possible moment, enough of them choose not to kill. And the people who return to Clarke make one final choice of their own. They decide that humanity's last days don't need to be defined by conquest, sacrifice, or survival at any cost. They can be defined by loyalty. If you want more complete series journeys told with the story, character choices, hidden connections, and ending logic kept together, stay with Series Span Cinema.